Welcome to Hawg Talk Wednesdays, presented to you by Vision Exteriors, always coming to you live from the Sterling Soap and Roastery Studios, part of the Believe and Buzz Radio Network, where you can hear us each week on 106.7 in Central Arkansas. All live shows are presented to you by Arkansas Brewing Company in downtown Ozark. I am Porter Hayes. Alongside me is Adam Hall, and we are also brought to you by Bet Online.
One day. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything sports betting. Every stat, matchup, breakdown, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during games. With the largest catalog of odds on everything from football, MLB playoffs, NHL, NBA, to political props. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. Bet Online. The game starts here.
Welcome, everybody. Adam, welcome. Wednesday episode presented to you by Vision Exteriors. And we have a full slate tonight. Two big games coming up. The final exhibition tune-up for Arkansas Razorback basketball against TCU in Dickey's Arena. And then, of course, the football game against Ole Miss in Fayetteville. And, Adam, we talked about, we're actually a couple minutes late. We're recording our This Week in Arkansas episode that you can catch tomorrow evening. But this TCU game seems like the perfect, you said it, dress rehearsal for the regular season.
Yeah, I mean, I want to see the things that they improved on, and it's crazy that you say things like that, but even over with the win over Kansas, there's still things to work on. Coach Cal made those points in the post game that rebounding, 3-point shooting. He basically let it out there. If you're not going to go for boards, you're not going to play. So that's something that you want to see. And I know that missing Adu is attributing to some of that, but other people have got to step up. So, I look for them to button those things up. Don't know what kind of rotations we'll see. I feel like they're still going to play around with that a little bit in your first two games. But then it's a little bit different too, because, with Cal, you have fewer players to rotate in and out than we've previously had. Just because of the walk-ons, the newer guys that were late additions, until they've earned that spot to be on, in a rotation, we're just going to be looking at the 8, 9, 10 guys.
Yeah, and this game will not be televised. I mean, everybody's kind of put it out there that ESPN will be in charge of that some way, somehow, unofficially, officially, we can say. But we were talking off air about that first game against Kansas in Bud Walton Arena, electric atmosphere. You wanted to put on a show for the fans in Bud Walton Arena to give them a glimpse. This gives you the perfect opportunity to have that second exhibition, that true, you're on the road, you're away from Fayetteville, dress rehearsal. It's not on TV, to really work on the things that like you said, the rebounding. And it's a different style matchup with this team coming in, and TCU, kind of like Arkansas, but Arkansas went to the cupboard a little bit deeper than TCU did when it comes to the matchup. This is going to be a different style matchup too than what we've seen against Kansas.
Oh, absolutely. And I know, it's one of those that Arkansas will return to the Dallas-Fort Worth area against Baylor a couple weeks later. But this is one that you don't necessarily know who, from a fan standpoint, is going to show up.
Yeah.
Just because, honestly, you never know with a lot of these expeditions, especially when you're doing one kind of on a neutral side. Well, or is this in TCU's?
No, it's Dickey's Arena. Well, I don't know.
I don't know where they play. So yeah, I mean, sorry to TCU. I didn't look that up. But as we've seen in football, Dallas area can turn to Fayetteville South very quickly. I would expect more for the Baylor matchup to be Arkansas fans in the building. I'm ready to see this team, though, in a true hostile environment, because not only are you bringing the reputation that Arkansas had under Eric Musselman, with just kind of, being that team that got to Elite Eights and Sweet 16s, but now you're bringing the element of the recruiting class, the transfer class, and Coach Calipari, you're bringing a whole new dynamic to this on top of what Arkansas basketball already was.
Yeah, and TCU only has one lone returning scholarship player, Ernest Uda Jr. He started in 29 games, averaged 4.3 points and 5 rebounds a game. But they have the 17th ranked freshman class. This is off the gofrogs.com website when they're talking about this year's team, but they have a couple of decent coming in. Basie and Allet. I'm sorry if I'm butchering these names. He averaged 17 and 5 from Old Dominion. Then you have, let's see, there was a Wenzel. He was a 37.7 3-point shooter coming from Wyoming. And then Reynolds, Noah Reynolds, he come from Green Bay. He averaged 20 points a game. And then, as I stated, Collins from Arizona State, he averaged 13 and 3. So, I mean, kind of honestly, if you think about this, it looks like they're playing against an Eric Musselman team. The transfers that are coming in are from, mid majors or, lower tiered D1 schools. So it's kind of funny when this matchup, but as we were saying, it's not on TV. I think we're going to see a different style of team because anxious to see, all right, this isn't televised. You're away from Fayetteville. How is this team going to respond? Because they're not going to have that atmosphere to feed off of. They're not going to, well, they might. You never know about throwing it off the backboard and the dunks. But how many threes do you think Z will? Because Coach Cal said he wasn't going to shoot any threes this year.
Yeah, and we saw how that went game one. So, looking at that, the TCU, their transfers in, I kind of, and this doesn't go across the board for all of these mid-major players. I don't want it to sound like that. But, Kansas brought in a guy, I think they said he's from South Dakota, 3-point specialist. And he came in, that first game, granted, it's the first game, he struggled. And so I questioned, we even saw John L struggled a little bit for Arkansas. Now, granted, Florida Atlantic's been there. They've gotten through the NCAA tournament. But you question some of these guys coming from mid-majors, lower level teams up into SEC, Big 12, wherever it may be. It's a completely different world. You're playing against different athletes than you played against at these schools.
Yeah, and I think that another thing, when you look at Arkansas and you've seen how nasty they were on defense, how is this TCU team going to respond to that? Again, I know probably the electric atmosphere of Bud Walton Arena played into that being on TV, but that TCU is looking at Arkansas coming in like, I don't care if Kansas players had 3 guys out, but you still blew them out by 20-something points or almost 20 points. There's that kind of fear, that intimidation of here comes Arkansas. But they're trying to do the same thing. It don't count, luckily, on their schedule or our schedule, but you also could think, what if this turns into a Texas-type situation where Coach Cal kind of, look, we're going to mess around with our matchups and our rotations. And what if this is a close game? They're thinking that this is going to be a blowout because of the Kansas game. And it ends up being a tough fight. You never know what you're going to get because, I'm rambling off guys that are scoring 13, 12, 17 points a game, but very easily one of these guys could go off for 20 or 30 points.
Yeah. I mean, any of them catches fire. You never know what you're going to get. And that's like that. I mean, week in and week out for a lot of these teams. So it's an exhibition game. That's just what you have to remind yourself. I mean, I think we all tried to have a short memory after that Arkansas Texas game, the blowout, but it's going to be a little bit more, not necessarily daunting, but we all know that what's going to happen, whether it's an exhibition or the regular season, when that first loss hits and the other fan bases start chirping.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They're waiting.
They're waiting
for an exhibition game in, but there's a fan base out east that, they're just licking their chops. And I guarantee you they got November 9th on their schedule of looking at how, when we look at Arkansas on a loss, because you really look at this non-con schedule, you have Baylor, and then you play Illinois, at Miami, Michigan, I mean, when you look at the non-con, maybe if you want to look at the old Oakland game, that one's going to be, funny as it may seem, but that's going to be your last non-con game before you get into the SEC season. But there's a few games on here when you look at the non-conference schedule that are a little daunting. So the Michigan game, and it's not as stacked as what may seem, but the SEC stacked as well, and that's what we love to see about this league. But to your point, back to this TCU game, you've got TCU, Lipscomb, and then Baylor. So you don't have that much time to prepare for that game. You know it's going to be a tough test. You really can button some things down. Then you have Lipscomb coming up on Wednesday, November 6th, before you go to – so you go to Fort Worth, you come back, play in Bud Walton on the 6th, then you go right back to Dallas in the American Airlines Arena. And it says Fort Worth, Texas on TCU Dickies Arena, so I'm assuming that is there. So I apologize once again to the TCU fans out there. We didn't mean to do that purposely, but it's going to be awesome to see this team. I will try to get the highlights that we can, during the whoever's there at their arena. So stay tuned for that. We'll give you the updates on that.
Maybe Kendall Briles will be in attendance.
There you go. Yeah.
Hey, Pinto, go get a picture of Kendall Briles. We would love to see it.
He'll be doing the third and long up the middle, at the line. But that's with the TCU game. You've got Lipscomb coming up, which we will talk more about that on Sunday night show. But this game against Ole Miss for the football team, when you look at it, Ole Miss on paper, their offense very much potent. It's their defense, their defensive line, what they give up rushing yards, but this is going to be a pretty evenly matched game. It's all going to come down to turnovers. If Arkansas does not turn the ball over, they win this game.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm sitting here, I was going through this before the show, and I don't know. I haven't watched much Ole Miss this season. Haven't really had a reason to. So, they're first in the country in points allowed per game with 11. They are 11th in yards allowed per game at 294. Flip side, Arkansas is 7th in total yards per game, and Ole Miss is 2nd. So it's one of those, which one is going to give? And I think in this situation, you hope that the defense that we saw against Tennessee shows back up. And I think that you try to turn this into a similar style of game. I don't know if getting in a shootout's in your best interest.
Yeah, and it goes back to that turnover. I don't think you want to get in a shootout with them because of that turnover. If you're going back and forth with Ole Miss, you look at the Texas A&M game, that the Oklahoma State game. You look at what you can even throw in I would say the LSU game. I mean, even though the score wasn't as close as the A&M game, that pick where they threw the interception and scored did just as much damage in controlling the game as that fumble at the end of the game during Texas A&M. That one turnover per game right there cost you a critical point in coming back and getting in with LSU or defeating Texas A&M.
Mm-hmm. And I think, this weekend with all signs pointing to the possible, having Rodney Hill back, adding another running back to help out Braylon Russell and DeBinion, I think that's huge.
Yeah, and we are going to be, everybody got a little taste of the tight end action. We seen the news about the 2 tight ends that are no longer with the team. We seen Paschke. You got but I think we're going to go back to, unless this offensive line does a really good job blocking, we might not see as much out of this. I was listening to Matt Jones today, and he was basically talking about, you're treating that Mississippi State game like you did the UAPB game. You did very good. You got to see all this offense and stuff, but you got to put that in the past because this is a totally different team coming in talent-wise. They're going to be able to match up with you. But I did see one really interesting stat from Ole Miss, and their offensive line ranks 105th in the PFF grade as a unit for the season. So when we're looking at, can Landon Jackson, Gregory get in there, Story get in there and cause havoc on Dart, that could be one of them unsung heroes of the game, is being able to finally get pressure, because this is a time to step up against another quality opponent. You've seen what happened in that Tennessee game. Play a quality opponent at home, limited mistakes, you pull it out.
Mm-hmm. I think that's one thing. You've got to make Dart uncomfortable, like you made Nico uncomfortable for Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the defensive line pressure from the linebackers, that's got to be there. And like, it was in the past, it was Mississippi State. It was what it was. But second play of the game, starting off with the fumble and fumble recovery. I mean, you need something like that. You need something big to start the game with, get your momentum going early. I think this is one that, whether it's offense or defense, you need to make a point on your first drive, whatever side of the ball you're on, make a point to carry out. Don't play from behind early on, at least.
Mm-hmm.
You
Oh,
don't know how the game's going to go, but don't get into a hole early. I think that having Kudus back helps the offensive line tremendously for Arkansas. We saw that across the board against Mississippi State, when running, passing opens up the tight ends like we saw more of. I think we just added another threat with getting the tight ends back involved in this.
Yes. And you know what, what a relief. I know it was against Mississippi State, but a relief of knowing you can rely on Russell. You didn't have to try to bring in Hill back when he might have been 60%. I really feel that Arkansas is going to try to rely heavy on Russell. But here's the kicker when it comes to Ole Miss's defense. They've only given up one rushing touchdown all year. They're averaging 76 yards of rushing offense per game, a total of 613 yards. Yards lost. So if you really want to look at the stat, I mean, they've given up 964 yards rushing, but it says yards lost rushing 351. So giving a 2.1 yards per rush. I think that's going to be the kicker on Arkansas. Is going to throw them for a loop, because I guarantee they're going to be able to run against Ole Miss. It all depends on the offensive line. But what gets me too is, if Arkansas can cause a turnover, really get in their head, this is going to be at Fayetteville. I don't care if it's 11 a.m. kickoff. They're going to be ready to go. They're going to be so anxious to see Arkansas put two good games together. And you've seen, when I go back to that Tennessee game, no turnovers in that game. You can play with the fourth ranked team in the country, whether Tennessee's there now or what. You were able to play with anybody in the country when you don't turn the ball over. You're in the game with A&M, and you've seen what they're doing to teams now. And then, of course, LSU, outside of the A&M game, you were able to do.
You bringing up the 76 yards that Ole Miss has given up on the ground. I will put it out there, and if this bites me in the butt, it bites me in the butt. Arkansas will triple that.
Mm-hmm.
So 228 yards between Russell, Hill being back, DeBinion, and you're adding in Taylon Green.
Yes.
That Ole Miss hadn't, I don't know if they've played a quarterback yet that has the dynamic of Taylon Green.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
So they're not just having to worry about running backs. They're having to worry about a quarterback also. So that brings a whole nother element for them. And, I'm going on it. But here's the thing too. And I've tried to steer away from it, just the thought process. This game's been circled on Pooh Paul's calendar.
Yeah.
Since he left. So it'll be something that he's going to want to show up and show out. But at the same time, he's going to have former teammates that want to shut him down.
Yeah, and I'm looking at Ole Miss's schedule. I mean, they played Furman, Middle Tennessee, Wake Forest, Georgia Southern, Kentucky, which they won that 20, or they got beat 20-17 on that one. Beat South Carolina 20-7-3. Then you had the LSU game, you lost 29-26. But when you look at it, I can really see where that's a smokescreen on that rushing yards. They've really played only one team that can run the ball really well. They
So
haven't got to the meat of it. Go ahead.
So it's another one of those like we've talked about with Missouri and
Mhm.
Lane. They even talked about it after that loss to Kentucky. They weren't ready for SEC play
Mhm.
because of the cupcakes that they had scheduled beforehand, and they haven't rebounded from it either.
And you look at the rest of the schedule after. I mean, look, they got blessed with this schedule. I mean, you got Arkansas, then you got Georgia. After that, you have Florida and Mississippi State. Like they got. I mean, This is. Are they playing the SEC East now? I mean,
Mhm.
this is crazy how they. I mean, no, and you're playing this easy of a schedule, and you got to sit there and take 29 injury breaks. I mean, really? Is that so? Yeah. Again, you might still not be. You squeaked out a win against Oklahoma, and so where do you gauge that on? Yeah, you really had a tough go against LSU, but don't let the score fool you. So did Arkansas.
Mhm.
LSU pulled out away from that game after that pick and then the score, but you barely beat Oklahoma at home 26-14. So this if the remaining games for Arkansas when it comes to SEC play, you win this one and coupled with what you did against Mississippi State, it's setting you for a really good, I mean, and you're bowl eligible.
Mhm.
And not to pick on you, it's just how many fans had this team bowl eligible at the end of the season, and you have a chance to do it before November.
Well, and that's something I think that they need to every game, whether it's this game, say we lose. Every game from here on out needs to be this is the game to get us bowl eligible. This is the game to get us back to where we said we needed to be. And I'll happily, eat the crow of the 3-9 prediction. I have no issues with Arkansas over, going way over what
Yeah.
I predicted. I'm perfectly fine with that. Um, but treat these games. I kind of look back at how Drinkwitz was beating Arkansas to get bowl eligible. Not only did they beat, and what was that, 2 years ago? I think it
Mhm.
was. I mean, you hate to take a page out of that book, but you kind of need to look at these games like what game is going to make us bowl eligible. Now, save the cigar for Mizzou,
Yeah.
but go in and just think you can kind of get a sigh of relief once you get that sixth win. I'm not saying
Yeah.
coast afterwards by any means. You've just taken one of your goals. You've accomplished one of your goals for the season. You can mark it off the list and move on to the next.
Yeah, definitely. And it's one of those things I know at the beginning of the year, I was like almost fine with, if they ended up 6-6, I would be okay with it because of where you were. But when you look at Ole Miss, winnable, Texas, maybe. I mean, that depends on if they play that thing at night, anything can happen, but it comes down to turnovers. And then you look at the last game of the season against Missouri, that's a winnable game. So if you're sitting at 5 wins, you could win 3 of those. It's hard for me to then, in retrospect, especially if you do lose against Missouri, being okay with them finishing a 6-6 season. I just see I don't even think I made my picks yet, but
You haven't.
I'm always the last one when it comes to the picks. I'm so scatterbrained and stuff, but I do see Arkansas winning this game. I really hope I'm not wrong when it comes to finally trying to hope they put 2 games together. But when you really look at Ole Miss, they're similar to Missouri. They start getting tested, and you're really seeing that they're not as good as what. I mean, I thought this team was going to be a 10-win team. I
Mhm.
mean, I really had Ole Miss that good because just the talent, having Dart back, and then of course, what I said about Lane Kiffin and his dad and playing for that always tries to seem to give you a little bit of motivation. And they're sitting at 6-2 right now, so could still get there, win out. I don't see them beating Georgia, but then you have Florida, Mississippi State, so. And then, of course, the bowl game, which is yet to be seen. But I want to go back to the comment that said it was about T. Will on defense. You can't come out soft like you did against LSU. You can't come back. You know how soft coverage they were, and it seemed like they were just. You can't let Ole Miss come out like LSU did and set that tone on the offensive side of the ball. Pat, you've got to play. You've got to trust your guys and the guys behind you that they're going to have your back, because if you let Dart get back and get comfortable in the pocket and they're throwing those 6, 7, 8 yards, and then you see what Mississippi State was able to do on the screen that ended up going for 55 yards. You got to put pressure. I think you try to gamble. That's what it said right here. Gambling a bit. I think you do. I think you're going to try to throw some different kind of blitzes at them, throw them off guard, but press them a little bit, because I'm not sure. I mean, go back to I missed their stats. I was going to look at their run. I think they're averaging 182 yards a game rushing. So, they can run the ball, but I just think you try to put some pressure on them, get Dart off his game, rushing yardage. Yeah, they're averaging 184 yards a game. And let's see, rushing. Henry Parrish Jr. has 663 yards rushing on the year, followed by Jackson Dart has 300. So, well, if you take away the sack yards, he's got 207, and Henry Parrish has got 656. So they heavily rely on their passing game. And on the receiving core, of course, you got Trey Harris. I mean, he's a dog. 6 touchdowns on the year, 987 yards receiving. So if you can shut down their key players, if you can really stop and you really hone in on Harris, you have a really good shot at winning this game.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's, Vegas is getting it right a lot. Having the line right now, they're almost favored by 7. I think it's going to be closer than that.
And usually when you have that 7-point spread at home, that's a 14-point swing away. They always try to give 3 to 7 points home, but I see it being a very close game. But you cannot turn the ball over. You have to play like the Tennessee game if you're going to win this game. You look at what's at stake, and look, it is still not outside the realm that Arkansas wins out. It's not. We know how they play Texas. We know how, if it's at home, if this is a night game at home, that just ramps everything up. I wish they would. I know there's a lot of coaches around the SEC complaining about night kickoffs now and stuff like that, but we can't really complain about what we've had this season.
Well, the Texas game is an 11 a.m. game.
Okay. All right.
So that's one of those that I've been on the fence on, but that one was announced like way before the season.
Yeah, I forgot.
Or not way before, but right before the season when they were announcing. That was one of the big ones that they were like, no, you get the 11 a.m. one. And some of that I think is attributed to, where nobody knew where Arkansas was going to be at. Nobody knew what type of game this was going to be. And so you weren't really sure. This is where I think that the NCAA should potentially, which I know it's a little bit different because you start getting into conferences and their media deals and whatnot. But I think you have to look at the NFL with their ability to flex games to different times that, hey, in some of these cases, I think you need to flex some of these games.
And you do with the times. Why not? You do there's some games where you give them a set schedule or whatever, but you're going 2 weeks out. I think you use that to your full advantage, and then you do that for the whole SEC. I mean, let's just put in Vandy, for example. How many games did they see them winning? How many games did they see them in? And you look at the Texas game, I believe that was an early kickoff. You have a highlighted match like that, you bump that to the 6:30 start time, or you see this game, Ole Miss and Arkansas, it's going to be a headbanger. Maybe push that back to a 2:30 game. There's just so many good games this last final stretch. I think that had a lot to do with it. We didn't realize how good the back end of this SEC schedule was for all teams. So yeah, you see Arkansas, Texas, and they did gamble on the time, but you play out the season and switch things around. I think that's a thing they could change in the future. Is like, well, we had this 11, but let's go ahead and move this back to a 6:30 game under the lights in Fayetteville.
I'll be curious. We know that the fans are going to show up. It wouldn't matter what record Arkansas currently had. The fans would show up for Texas. But you have the fact that we're having the season that we're having, bouncing back after last year. The environment up there for that game is going to be insane. Just like I hope it's going to be this weekend. I know there's a lot of love-hate with Lane Kiffin when it comes to Arkansas fans. Even with me myself, It's one of those things. If you're looking for somebody to follow on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, Lane Kiffin doesn't count to follow because he likes to troll with the best of them. But with him, I always expect him to try to pull out some tricks whenever he comes to Fayetteville, or even when Arkansas comes to Ole Miss.
Yeah.
This game is always something for him.
That's where you got to watch your film. This is where T Will, I think, is one of T Will's most important defensive schemes when it comes to. I mean, of course, we can talk about Texas, but we got 2 weeks. That's the thing. I think you come out and you have 4 games left with a bye. It's almost like going into the fourth quarter, 2 minutes left. You have, or say 2.5 minutes left. You have all 3 timeouts and your 2-minute warning. I think you handle that this way. You have just a few games left. You could put everything out on the line, really blitz them, dogfight them, because you have a week off to prepare for Texas. That's another thing that can go into this, man. You go in there with your heads up, knock them down, get the win. You have now a week to simmer, celebrate, and get ready for you're bowl eligible. So if they win, they're going to be having that extra high. Come out and let's finish the season off.
I'm ready to see it. I'm actually kind of anxious to see what I know. We're all anxious to see what T Will brings. I wonder, and I'm going back to Pooh Hall on this. Players come and go. I get it, but at the same time, it's kind of like, do you think that, kind of like we saw with Petrino and the tight ends, T will try to drum up something with the linebackers for Arkansas?
Yeah.
Just to kind of like show up, say, hey, we still got them. Yeah. Just to try to one-up them a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a petty person, so it's one of those things that I'm like, why not?
I think Sam Pittman and his staff are too. Because, look, they had a chip on their shoulder coming this season, but this is just me overthinking the situation when I look at this schedule. Because this is a scenario as we wrap up, I could put there. Do you really kind of try to bring a different scheme? You're giving Texas and Missouri an extra week to watch that film on what you're doing differently. It's almost how when we're heading into a season and we watch film and you got 2 or 3 games underneath the belt of Arkansas, do you try to, on a defensive standpoint, do you come whatever and just see what happens the rest of the season? Or do you kind of hold back a little bit and then you come out, you got Texas, La Tech, and Missouri, those last 3 games, finish it and then just come out and you show your cards against Texas. I don't know. Again, it's just one of those things I think about, but it's just, I don't know if the bye is any different than you play Texas, then you got La Tech and then Missouri either. It's just, that's where my mind goes with all this stuff sometimes.
Yeah, I think we're at the point that I don't know if I don't feel like we could bet on not showing all of our cards.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things that, like we've talked about before, you want these guys to have game practice with this, if it's something they're introducing. And I just expect that it's just going to be balls to the wall for both sides for the rest of the season. I've questioned if this bye week is going to hurt us going in before Texas.
Yeah, that's true.
Just because of what we saw before LSU.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just one of those, PTSD, if you will. But I fully expect that the next game, there's not necessarily going to be like, what tricks or what cards can we show? I think it's just going to be, we're week in and week out, we're just going to come in and show you who we are. Maybe it's something that we haven't seen, but it's something they've been practicing all along. Or maybe he just mixes up a formation, disguises it differently. I think that's one thing that they did really well against Tennessee was just disguising their looks, looking like a blitz, dropping 3 back. I mean, it confused the hell out of Tennessee, and I think you have to do that here.
Yeah, and I think you give them hell because you give them hell, you bring it, show your cards, you play it out, bust their ass, because now you have that monkey off your back of now you're bowl eligible, right? You got that relief, you got that fire, you're bowl eligible. bring the bowling ball back out. You've got a week off, and then you just finish out the last 3 games of the season. I think that's what we see on Saturday. I think Arkansas comes out ready to go. You're going to rely on. We're going to see a lot of Braylon Russell and battering ram, and I want him to get a touchdown. I want him to get a touchdown this game. I think he does, and just the confidence that's going to happen. And you know what? You think about what has happened to Arkansas, where I think this is going to be a year where they beat Ole Miss, they become bowl eligible, and they're going to win either the Texas or Ole Miss game. I see them beating Ole Miss and then La Tech. I mean, then you finish 8 wins. Think about all the adversity. You lost Talon for a little bit, had to rely on Singletary to beat, come from behind it and beat Tennessee. You've got Jaquindon Jackson, who was out last week in a game that could have really been close. They brought it back closer at the end. You're getting over all these hurdles, and you're sitting at 5-3 and 3-2. And what we've seen in the past is this game now, what we could possibly see in a 3-5 team coming in here in a 2-3 team in this. That's just the difference in this year's team.
I hope for this game and for Jackson Dart that he does his best Matt Corral impression with 6 interceptions. You know what? If you don't want to give us 6, that's fine. Give me 2. But
wouldn't that be a fitting way for Hudson Clark to go out?
Oh, I know DP over on Hawg HQ Live is itching for Hudson Clark to get some INTs against Ole Miss this weekend.
I mean, we're talking about hurdles and adversity. The roller coaster that dude's been on his whole career. And out there in the universe, there's actually a kid named after him. How awesome would that be? And I'm not saying through 3 or 4 picks, but this guy gets an interception to cap the game, or he gets an interception during the game and a key point in the game. That would be the most amazing way because that's what started it all. That's what started his stardom was the 3 interceptions. You got on scholarship, you had the roller coaster, you're injured, and then you're coming back. Then you cap it off your last game against Ole Miss and have an interception or 2. I think that would be awesome.
You know what? Go out against Ole Miss just like you came in.
How do you truly feel about the Hogs?
I mean,
I just had to throw that comment in there.
Y'all, it's one of those that you'll see my prediction tomorrow, and it's one of those. Am I going to pick Arkansas? Am I going to pick Ole Miss? Am I playing to further my lead in the pick'em? I'm to the point that I can take some risks, just to try to further my lead out. So you never know. I honestly think this is going to be a tough game for both teams.
I just noticed something. I hope DP and Matt hears this. I just now thought of this. The person who is in control of this, who sees everybody's picks before they make theirs, is in control of how they can pick or choose how they pick. I think we're going to have to. I'm going to jump on Sunday's show, depending on how this goes. I think we need to have a group meeting on HQ Live about this. I didn't even think about that before now.
I'm surprised it's taken y'all this long to bring that up.
Yeah.
But I will also throw a wrench in that and say that this last week, I sent all 3 of y'all my picks first because y'all were late on sending y'all's. So it's just like, hey, here are my picks. I'm waiting on y'all to send yours. So y'all had mine, and I still went 6-1.
Well, this is as close as political I'll get. The ballots could be changed. We don't know where the ballots are, how they're changed, but we know where they go. We know where the voting poll is. So let's see.
Do you want me to put up on screen I've already got my picks.
Oh, you're good.
The cool thing, though, I say the cool thing is y'all could at any point in time, like I say, hey, here's the pick. Be like, no, I don't really want to do that.
True.
Y'all are letting me control what games we pick every week.
That's true.
Which, if anybody wonders, Arkansas and whoever they're playing, the other college games are truly just matchups. And even I look at what this spread is. I go off close spreads just to see what games might throw somebody off.
It's going to be an interesting weekend. Of course, what we talked about, TCU coming up Friday, will not be televised. Again, you'll catch highlights if ES Pinto comes out of hiding or not. You'll be able to see the highlights, and of course, after the game, and then of course the Saturday game. But on Sunday, we had kind of teased it. Speaking of sports highlights, where you could see highlights of games, we're going to have on War Machine, the YouTube sensation, Arkansas. And this guy, I talked to, I've been friends with him since 2019. It was actually the first interview I ever did before I get into the podcast. And before I even started with the Hawg Talk, I interviewed him, wrote an article about him. But this guy has so much film, so many games in his library. I think he at one point was just looking for a few, but we'll have War Machine on Sunday to talk with us. Hopefully we're celebrating 2 wins heading into a bye week and the final 3 weeks of the season, kicking off the non-con season with Arkansas basketball. So it could set up to be a very good weekend. And whatnot, better way to cap off the weekend is have War Machine on the show.
I'm kind of curious to pick his brain a little bit just to see how all that works. And also, I know you said he was back on in 2019. I'm anxious just as a person to put a face with,
Yeah,
everything else. Got some questions for him.
there you go. Well, that will do it for this episode of the Hawg Talk podcast. Again, brought to you by Bet Online, Believe Network, Sterling Soap Roastery Studios. We'll come back to you on Sunday.